Hey everyone, Gavin here from Chinese Medicine Education and China Book Sydney. I'm here today with the lovely Sabina Wilms, today we're going to talk a bit about topics on like translation, maybe a bit of Sun Tzu Miao, and yeah, just a few other little things. So really excited to have this chat. For those of you who don't know Sabina, I'd be kind of surprised. She's been very active in translating a lot of different texts, particularly with like Sun Tzu Miao's work. Yeah, anyway, I'll get a little bit more of her background, but yeah, she's really a go-to in our industry for learning and understanding translation work. So that's why I wanted to bring her on and have a little bit of a chat today. So thank you for joining me, Sabina. Thank you for taking the time
Thank
out.
you. Thank you. I think you got up really early, right?
Yeah, but yeah, my daughter woke me up earlier anyway, so
Okay.
yeah, I was ready up.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I have to say, China Books is a really cool bookstore. I get to visit the Sydney one.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we had you with Deborah Betts like a number of years
yeah,
back.
a
I
long
was
time
I
ago.
was actually around during that one behind the camera. I think
Okay.
we did a bit of filming then, and yeah,
Yeah, you guys do great work. It's
yeah,
it's really wonderful to have that. I think people in your neck of the woods are really lucky to have you guys.
yeah. Thanks. Okay, so to start with, I just wanted to get like a little bit more of your background because you kind of come from an interesting background where you come from like a family with medical doctors, but you kind of initially rebelled against that and sort of went to China to learn like language and literature and philosophy. But you've sort of circled back into now being like a key kind of translator in Chinese medical text. So I was just really curious to get a little bit more of that journey for you.
You've done your homework. Yeah. Yeah, I mean I come from a family, they're all medical people, all my relatives in Germany, and I was definitely the black sheep. I went really far away, trying to find something that my dad didn't know anything about. So I studied Chinese and had a great time living in Taiwan for a couple of years. And then I came back and ended up getting a scholarship to go to the US to study at the University of Arizona and got a degree in East Asian Studies. And somehow I got into archaeology, John Olson, ancient Chinese archaeology. And then I took a class in medical anthropology with Mark Nichter. And he was awesome. And he was like, oh my God, you can read texts that are 2,000 years old. You are so lucky. And he taught me to ask questions and to look at medicine as a way of understanding the culture. So that's kind of how I went back into medicine as really somebody interested in history, cosmology, social relations, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I picked Sun Miao's gynecology volumes for my dissertation topic because I had to prove to Don Harper, to my advisor, that there was actually information on gynecology out there. And also because I had a baby, so as a woman, I was like, wow, childbirth is a really fertile pregnancy and childbirth and gestation and reproduction, postpartum care. All of these are such potent metaphors and such wonderful ways of looking at a culture and society and social relations. And then through that, part of that was translating the 10 months of pregnancy, and then people started inviting me for fertility conferences, and I was like, really? I don't really fit in here, but they loved it. That information on nurturing the fetus during each month of the pregnancy. And then I started teaching at an acupuncture college in Tucson where I was living, just kind of for fun. And yeah, kind of got more and more into it.
Yeah,
And
wow.
then I
No, that's
got a
really
full
cool.
time job in Taos, and I wanted to move to New Mexico. So that was as an editor, senior editor for Red Wing Books, Paradigm Publications.
Yeah, amazing. And the rest is
Yeah.
history kind of thing.
Yeah, and then I just and then I moved to Portland to teach at the National University of Natural Medicine, and that was really wonderful to teach at a medical college, where all the students were acupuncturists or learning future acupuncturists, and I feel really lucky as an academic. I mean, at this point, I don't know if I'm still an academic. I'm sort of in between the I call myself a practitioner. I think it's how can you teach this stuff and talk about this stuff, and how can you translate without thinking about the content of what you're translating. I think, at least for me, I can't be writing books about something and not engage with it with my heart and soul in addition to the brain. That's just has never worked for me.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I want to sort of come back to that as well, like how you've kind of like incorporated some of those things, and also I want to dig in a little bit about your work into Sun Tzu Miao. But just to give people an idea about translation work, like some people might think that, oh, it's just as easy as learning Chinese, and then you can just pull out the Huangdi Neijing and start sort of like translating it. But it's definitely not that easy. So could you give us a little bit more sort of insight into what goes into translating those like classical works? And maybe if you've got like a example of like a particular character or a phrase or something that's kind of like led you down a rabbit hole, that would be great.
Oh dear. It's a big question. And I've evolved my understanding quite a bit. And I think the really short answer, which is kind of ironic, because I have spent much of my life as a translator and publishing translations. And I think the older I get, I mean, there are books that are very straightforward. Like if you're just doing formularies, you can do the lists of substances. I mean, sometimes you come across a substance and it's a weird name, and then you really have to know how to look at weird dictionaries and read Chinese definitions. But that's a pretty easy skill to acquire, relatively speaking. But like formularies, you get the list of the signs and symptoms, then you get the ingredients, and then you get the instructions for how to prepare it. That's fairly straightforward. But a text like the Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic is really different. It's a really challenging text to make sense of. And the first thing, I mean, in order to translate, there's a two-step. I mean, there are many steps, but the first step is you have to know what the authors were trying to say. And then you have to figure out how to express that to your audience. And there are just a lot of instances where we don't know, where there are typos, there are textual problems, there are omissions, there are wrong characters based on dynastic taboos, there are insertions of commentary, and you can the older I get and the more I work with the text, this is something that you develop over years and years, where you kind of get a special sense for when the text just doesn't flow quite right, when there's or if you're a medical historian, you just know that there's a character, there's a way of phrasing something that this is not Han Dynasty, that has to be a Song Dynasty insertion or Tang Dynasty or whatever. So there's commentary that got incorporated into the text that was originally, you had the original text in large characters and then the commentary in small characters. And then somebody copied the text and copied, like the telephone game.
Yeah.
And you end up where you don't know anymore what's original and what's commentary. And that's very common in the Yellow Emperor's Classic. And then the text is not just one author. It consists of many different layers, and a lot of times they are contradictory because you have some chapters that are warring states, or a big part of the chapter, or the idea in the chapter, the key idea would be warring states. And then you have some layers that are Han Dynasty or even later. And medicine is alive, just like it is today, right? We don't think that the way we treat it, I don't know, I can't come up with something. I mean, medicine evolves
Totally.
over decades. And here we always think that classical Chinese medicine is this static entity. And it isn't. When you look at it, it's hundreds and hundreds of years. So from 200 BCE to 200 CE, like let's say some chapters of the Yellow Emperor's Classic to the Nanjing, the Classic of Difficulties, there was a huge development that went on in these 400, 500 years. So it can be really confusing when you're trying to make sense of a text and you're treating it as one voice, when it's really different voices arguing with each other.
And then there's also the complexity of the language as well, because it's not like learning modern Mandarin or Chinese is not going to give you the skills to actually get into like the characters used in those kind of texts either.
Right. You absolutely need grammar. And that's been the biggest, I think that's my little contribution to the field. And that's my big frustration, is that classical grammar, it can get really complicated, but there are some pretty straightforward, simple ground rules that you can master. I mean, there are rules. There's like a negative that is used where the character that follows that negative is a noun, functions as a noun. You know, characters can function as verbs or as nouns. Like it can be like Wang for king. It can be a king, or it can be to act like a king, or to make somebody a king. So a certain negative, you know that when the character for king follows that negative, then it means to not have a king or whatever. But if it's a different negative, then you know that the king has to be a verb. It has to be a verb. So grammar, it's like they're really kind of simple, quick rules. Or the order of characters. It's always like what modifies comes before what is being modified. It's such a simple rule. So when you have essence, spirit, Jingshen, it can be Jing and Shen. You have two nouns. They can be coordinate or subordinate. This is really nerdy. It's like Jing essence and Shen spirit. What does that mean as a compound? Essence spirit, is it essence and spirit? It absolutely can be. Or it can be essence spirit, and just like in English, essence spirit is a kind of spirit. But spirit essence is a completely different thing. And Jingshen cannot mean spirit essence. That's just basic Chinese grammar. So the order matters.
Yeah, wow.
And that's where I get so frustrated when I see these really wonderful, well-meaning practitioners who know modern Chinese. And actually the same rule applies in modern Chinese, but there are a lot more particles to make it clear. But you know, people, and they just they translate character they look at the character, and the character you can look up in English, but they ignore the syntax, the rules for how characters relate to each other. And it's not rocket science. And particles are so wonderful and helpful. Don't get me started. Particles are the best. I mean, it's hard to look them up in a dictionary. The dictionary explanations don't really make sense. You have to practice it in context. But it's awesome. Particles are super helpful. So that's character relations. And then you have to know the history. You have to know the century, the category of literature that a text comes from. You have to know the political background of the author, the intention of the author. Is he responding to a different author? Is he defending his position because he's being accused of malpractice in court? Is he trying to sell his case studies? Is it a collection of case studies published by this physician's grandson who is trying to promote the family lineage? I mean, there's a million different. Is it self-cultivation? Is it a Taoist text, which means that the characters have completely different meanings because you're not treating a patient's body, but it's about cultivating your own body. So that there's just all these layers of meaning that you figuring out what a character means in a particular time period, used by a particular author, used in a particular text, and in the context. That's where it gets really tricky.
Yeah, wow. It's
Welcome to my world.
So many layers to it, and so contextual as well. Like so many layers of context that you have to weed through to get there. And so there's so many texts of like Chinese medicine, like through the history, and also texts available like in China at the moment. And it seems like what we have translated into English is only like a drop in the ocean. Can you give some kind of like understanding of like how much we're kind of missing out in terms of like if we're just focusing on what's being translated into English, like the ocean of potential medical texts and things like that?
I don't even know where to start. I mean, you just put it beautifully. It really is true, and I think that's where our native Chinese colleagues are at a huge advantage, because there is so much, the level of discourse in modern Chinese is just so much higher, because they may not be trained in classical Chinese, but they can read commentaries or discussions by later physicians on this material. So they have generally, if they're native Chinese and they're literate in Chinese, they just have a much better understanding of the stuff, of this abundance, this ocean of information that's out there, which a lot of it, we may ignore, we may throw some of it out and call it superstition, who knows what, but then some weird condition shows up, like COVID, or you're confronted with a weird case and you're like, oh, I remember this doctor, had this weird story about this or that, and all of a sudden there might be an inspiration for a approach, whether it's diagnostic or treatment, that it's like out of the norm what you would learn at a Chinese medicine school in the West. So it just, there's a lot out there. And like, I just taught a course on postpartum pampering with Leo Locke. And, when you look at what's available in English on postpartum care, there's very, very little.
Actually, that was one thing that came up for us when we had our baby last year. I was looking for like Chinese medicine, like postpartum stuff, and it was hard to find good stuff. Other than just like the general kind of things that you'd find or we learned from school. But I found that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's really tragic, because postpartum recovery, it's like in Sun Smiao, it's a third of his gynecology formulas are on postpartum care. So recovering from childbirth and also ensuring, wonderful breast milk flow and all of that. And then, of course, pediatrics is the next step. That was, there's so much that's just not accessible in Western languages.
Yeah, we really need more translators working.
Or like that's where Leo and we're like, well, we'll just teach a course.
Yeah.
Because producing books is just like years and years and years.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier the telephone game of like how translations kind of get distorted as they're sort of like passed through different interpretations and things like that. There's some common kind of misunderstandings or misconceptions that you kind of see people having around like classical texts or understandings in like modern Chinese medicine field.
You want me to pick my brain for like an example? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, is it? Yeah, do you find like is there a kind of any kind of standout like misunderstandings that people might get from those kind of passed
Yeah.
down different layers of interpretation that's kind of like uh, yeah like taken a different track from the original meaning and but people are kind of like oh this is what it means and this is how I see it.
Yeah, okay. I got an example.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the standard example. So correct me, like interrupt me if this is just obvious. But to me, this explains it all in a nutshell. Or not a nutshell, in a giant walnut. Um, and this is Suben 5. So this is from my book Humming with Elephants. And Suben 5 is one of my all-time favorite texts. And the whole book, it's the Yin Yang, Yin Xiang, it's the great treatise on the resonant manifestations of yin and yang. So the entire Suben chapter 5, Plain Questions, which is one half, the first half of the Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic, chapter 5 is really, really long actually. And the entire chapter is about yin yang relations. I mean, it's about yin yang and then the 5 dynamic agents as well, but it's really about microcosm macrocosm relationships. And the second or third sentence in that, the first sentence is yin and yang are the father and mother of creation. They are the spirit of the Shenming. They are the guide rope and connection, whatever thread for the myriad. It's yin and yang is everything. The entire universe is made out of yin and yang, and that's how you understand cosmic change, and everything is change. And then I think it's the second sentence is 治病比求于本. Treat, and literally 治病 is treat disease, must. 求 means to seek or to search, and then 于 is a particle in on that. And then 本 is you know the passage I'm talking like
I think so, yeah.
You're familiar with it, right?
Yeah.
To treat disease, you find the root.
Right, yeah, yeah.
You go for the root, which is how it like every Chinese medicine practitioner or student learns it in their first class. And the idea is that biomedicine treats the branches and Chinese medicine is holistic and it treats the root of disease. So, so there's 2 words for root. There's gun and there's ben. And gun is when you're really specific. Gun specifically is about the root. And ben, if you look at the character, it's the trunk of the tree. So it's actually not the root. It's the metaphorical root. It's sometimes root is just fine. But when you really look at it, it's the core. It's the trunk. So foundation is a better word for it, but it's really the core. So that's different. And I used to have an apple orchard, and treating the trunk is different from treating the root, treating the core. As a biodynamic farmer, that's a very different, concept from just treating the roots. Roots and branches, or everything that's external on the outside, and what's at the very center. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the word disease is actually a much broader term. It's also used for disorder, for any kind of issue. And the character for treat is originally derived from it's managing the waterways. And it's putting things in good order. So you can read it as to treat disease in a really narrow medical sense, but you can also read it much larger as to address any kind of disorder, anything that's out of whack, that's just not right. You must seek And it doesn't say you must seek the ben, the root or foundation. It says you must seek in the ben. So you must, it doesn't say seek the root or the trunk or the core or whatever, but it says you must seek it in the core. And the core here, that yu is that particle, in or at. So to treat a condition that's out of whack, you must track it to the core. And from the context, it's obvious that it's talking about yin and yang. So it's actually way bigger than treating the root cause of a disease. What it's saying is, to address any disorder in the universe, you must look at it through the lens of yin and yang.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I think that really like highlights how much nuance there can be in just like such a short little phrase. That's amazing.
And it's such a famous phrase, and we use it all the time. And it's, I mean, that message about, to treat disease, you go for the root. It's a great message. It's quite relevant, but at the same time, it's actually so much deeper.
Yeah, wow.
It's so much bigger. Like, to treat any kind of disorder, you address it through the lens of yin and yang. It's like, to me, that's so cool.
Yeah,
but then I'm weird.
And so for somebody who's kind of like listening to this and kind of like feels a little excited about the idea of maybe one day being able to read a line or some passages and understand it for themselves, what would be your recommendation for somebody, maybe someone who doesn't really have a foundation in Chinese? What would be like a recommended pathway to sort of get into that? And are there also like particular kind of big mistakes or stumbling blocks that you see people sort of make when they're going through that? And I know you've just recently finished up your 2-year mentorship and about to dive into another one. So maybe you could also tell us a little bit about what's involved in that.
Yeah. So I've developed over decades of teaching this stuff. And I used to think, I'll just teach one class, and these acupuncture students, I can teach them classical Chinese grammar in one semester. And it went from one semester to being the core of the doctoral program at the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's turned into a 2-year training program. And I've just learned to stretch it out because people are busy, and it's nice to take a week off here and there. And I intersperse the classes with text readings because it inspires the new students if they get to see the older students. And so we get together once a month and just work on a text, which is really, really fun. And so I think that's my favorite thing to do. And that's really, to get back to your original question, or what I said earlier, is these days, I don't know if it's even possible. I don't think it's possible to create a translation of a text like the Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic and hand it to you in English. No matter the world's best translation, I can sit there and I can I can go over each sentence 1,000,000 times, and it can be the absolute best, most careful, meticulous translation. I don't think you would ever be able to read an English version and fully understand what's going on. Like the example that I just gave, right? So what I really love to do is actually get students to the level where we can read the texts together, where they have a little bit of grammar or just enough grammar, and then they can go look up the characters. And then I love working with clinicians and digging into what the meaning is with that on the basis of that foundation. So I have a free introduction to classical Chinese class. It's 2 months, 8 weeks, and it's a video post and a written post every week that you can just sign up anytime at my website, translatingchinesemedicine.com. And you can do it multiple times. You did it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you follow it all the way to the
Yeah,
end?
yeah, I followed it, and I think yeah, the one of the best things was how to set up your Plico
Yes.
dictionary with the classical stuff, and then yeah, some of those like nuances and just being able to. It was really good to be able to just start like playing around with understanding it a little bit deeper because
Yeah.
what you get from those classical dictionaries is very different from what you would get from the standard kind of modern dictionaries. So yeah, yeah, I would highly recommend that.
Right? And it's not rocket science to set up your Plico, and you pay for the little add-on for the classical dictionary. And I mean, to me, my job of teaching people how to translate Chinese medicine just got possible. It was really made possible when we got Plico, which was, I don't know, 10 years or however long it's been now. It was just amazing. It really changed the whole scene, because before that it used to be that I would have to sit in the library with my 20 volume Chinese dictionary and dig around for hours to look up and just teaching students how to look up characters was so challenging. So Pleco is the most amazing tool, but it can be a little misleading because it seems so simple, and you have to not look at the modern edition definitions, but at the classical definitions, and you have to look at each word individually, each character individually, instead of getting the paired. Pleco will automatically go for the modern pairs and compounds, and that
Yeah,
can
yeah,
be
I found that. Yeah, I had to play around
yeah.
with the settings so it wouldn't automatically do that. That was annoying.
Yeah, yeah. So learning your tools is a huge aspect of what I do in my classes. Yeah. So I do the free class, which is really intense, but at least it kind of opens your eyes and gives you a sense, do I even want to go into this? Right? That was the idea with that class. It wasn't to teach you how to become a translator, but it was more like, this is the landscape if you're even thinking about it. And then I have a monthly membership if you already have some background, especially if you have background in modern Chinese. But really, I think the core of what I do is that 2-year training program, which we're starting this Thursday.
And having
And
done the mentorship now, have you seen particular kind of like mistakes or like stumbling blocks like practitioner or students of yours sort of run into as they're trying to sort of get a grasp of things and get into it?
I think, and this is really subtle, but I think the biggest stumbling block is that, or I should put it in a positive framework, where the biggest step in a student's ability to read classical Chinese is if you're able to look at characters not through their Western translations, whatever language, whether you're working in French or Spanish or English or whatever, but you're actually just looking at the character. So you are not trying to decide whether ben means root or foundation or core, but you're able to look at that passage and you're just thinking, you're just dealing with ben. That's a huge step, because when we get hung up where we choose a single character for a single translation for a character, sometimes it's quite adequate and other times it's not. And then we get, like, I know at one point I translated, for one thing, I translated Xing or Ming, no, it was Ming, as destiny. And Lonnie Jared was so excited because he uses destiny. And he was like, yay, Sabina and I actually agree on something, because we've had a lot of disagreements in the past. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Ming does not mean destiny. It just means destiny in this particular line. And it really doesn't mean destiny because Ming is such a huge concept. But then, as a translator, you have to put it into English. So that's the irony of that's why I'm kind of with Lao Tzu. It's like I just want to sit on my water buffalo and ride off into the sunset at some point.
Yeah, I guess it would be a very different experience if you're looking at a text and trying to choose the perfect translation and the perfect words for it, as opposed to sort of understanding it and just being able to look at it and kind of like soak in that meaning for yourself. And I guess that's what you're
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
trying to do with the mentorship is like give people those tools to be able to kind of look at the text and soak in their own meaning and get that
yeah,
information.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It almost
reading
seems
it
like
instead of translating it.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
almost a bit of self-cultivation for the practitioner, I guess, like reading that
totally.
and yeah, and then being able to go through it. Which actually kind of brings me to my next line of questions around Sun Tzu Miao, because he was well known not only for like the his medical side of things, but also he was really big on cultivation and ethics and things like that. So, would you be able to sort of give us a little bit of insight into what more there was to Sun Tzu Miao other than say like his herbal formulas or his treatments? Like, I know you've done some work in translating like his cultivation texts. So, yeah, I'd be really interested to get a little bit more out of
Yeah,
you for that.
I mean, to me, Sun Tzu Miao is still really a mystery. Like, we really don't know that much. And I'm still on the fence on whether he actually. I, I'm convinced he was not a professionally practicing doctor of Chinese medicine the way we think of today. Um, what we know from his biography was that he was very knowledgeable as a face reader, as a cultivator, as an advisor to the emperor. He was a really deep person, a member of the Tang Dynasty, the elite, to the point where the emperor actively recruited him, and he joined the court. So um, he was a supposedly an initiated Taoist priest, and that makes sense to me just from knowing his biographies and the what we know about him. So he was also very knowledgeable in Buddhism. So I'm so fascinated by him because he's a symbol of this early Tang dynasty, this beautiful combination of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism that is that was the early Tang. That's the early medieval China, the response to the Han Dynasty collapsing, and then you have these centuries of foreign invasions and civil war, and really questioning the meaning of life, and a lot of horrible suffering, pain and suffering going on. And then the Tang Dynasty happens, and China is reunited. And the early Tang to me is this period where there was this beautiful openness to all the wisdom coming in from the Silk Road. So Buddhism really changed Chinese culture in a very profound way. And I see Sun Tzu Miao's writing. I mean, the text that everybody knows is the Beiji Qianzhen Yao Fang, the 1,000 gold formulas to prepare for emergencies. And there's one volume in there towards the end that is on yang xing, on nurturing your true nature, your inner nature. And it sticks out. The rest of it is medical formulas, right? You get gynecology, then you have pediatrics, then you have all the general, and then you have dietetics, you have the treatment of poisonous stuff and all of this other stuff. And then there's a whole volume on self-cultivation, and it's longevity and immortality practices. And it's important that we realize that it's not just longevity, but this is also there's a layer, a textural layer that is based on the Tang Dynasty, um, religious ideas around transforming the body to become immortal. So there are formulas in there that are quite toxic, that we know would have killed a person. And they interpreted that as leaving your mortal shell behind. So there are that volume is fascinating, but it's it's from a religious context. It's very, very different from the other stuff because it's about self-cultivation. And what really struck me when I taught that class with Leo last year, Leo Locke, is how much it wasn't. I kind of always had the impression that it was mostly Taoist immortality practices. And Taoism is very, very, and there's philosophical Taoism, and then there's the religious practices, the alchemical, and it's like a whole special technical stuff. It's like, oh my God. Oh, so I kind of stayed away from it, but everybody's always asking for it. And I had Leo Locke, and so we collaborated in doing this. And it was, and there's sexual cultivation and dietetics and all this, and like, anmo, like massage, and there's yogic stretches that are clearly influenced by Indian yoga, really cool stuff. Tao Yin, the guiding the chi and breath work, playing with the chi, attuning the chi. It's really cool stuff. But what really struck me, which I don't think anybody else has really been talking about, unless you talk to some of the really old Chinese doctors, is the emphasis on virtue, on ethical, on doing things right. So kind of the Confucian aspect. And that was really interesting for me to see how he's so, and then the Buddhism, how these three strands come together in that volume. It's very, very powerful. And yeah, I learned a lot. I really appreciated
Yeah,
his
wow.
writings.
I guess that sounds like another great example of text kind of like locked in Chinese. Like it sounds like there's so much amazing stuff there, and also something that you would need to have your own ability to sort of interpret that information and what that kind of like means, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, so
It's been very transformational for me in preparing the class and then teaching it. And we had this really small but really outstanding group of students, and I think it was really a transformational experience.
amazing. That sounds really
Yeah, it
cool.
was magical. Yeah.
Actually, that sounds like a quite a powerful way to kind of like teach the text is through like a course where you can have that discussion and that sort of
Yeah.
elaboration on texts and lines and things like that. Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to come back to one of the books that you've written, the Healing Virtue Power book, because that was a translation of Sun Tzu Miao's sort of introduction to his big text. And it was heavily sort of around like the ethics of a doctor. How sort of relevant or challenging do you feel like those sort of standards are for the modern practitioner that he set, or are there some kind of like insights or things that really stood out for you translating that just that introductory section of his text?
That's a good question. And I have recently really gotten into teaching medical ethics, and I really enjoy it. But of course, I'm not a clinical practitioner, so I have a little bit of an imposter syndrome about it. But at the same time, Sun Tzu Miao wasn't either. He was not a professional, he wasn't taking money to treat people. So I think how relevant is his writing, right? When the nature of your acupuncture practice, clinical practice, is completely different because you have your rent to pay, you have to worry about your insurance, like coding things, you have patients who you have to communicate with patients who are coming from a biomedical paradigm. It's like a completely completely different world. But what I really appreciate about Sun Tzu Miao's teachings in that chapter is I find it really inspiring. And I hope that I can kind of bring that ancient perspective. Like, this is Sun Tzu Miao engaging with Buddhism and changing the nature of what medicine, what it means to treat another human being, and reminding his contemporaries of the importance of alleviating suffering. And it's like, hello, if you're going to be a doctor, this is what you need to do. This is what it means. And it's this huge calling. And of course, Sun Tzu Miao and me are both very privileged because we don't see patient after patient after patient. I'm sitting in my little office here. So I can, but I think it's okay as long as I leave the judgment out if you don't follow this high ideal. It's a beautiful ideal. And I really hope that I can remind, because to me, a lot of students, most students who I teach go into Chinese medicine because they come with the most beautiful intentions. They want to alleviate suffering. They maybe have had their own treatments and they know biomedicine didn't work for them. They don't want to be in the conveyor belt. They know they can make a lot more money as a biomedical doctor, but they want to have the hands-on, they want to have the heart-to-heart connection. There are all these beautiful reasons why people get into a medicine that really means harmonizing heaven and earth. It's so beautiful. And that chapter really can serve to remind people of why they got into it in the first place.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I have a copy of the book as well. I really enjoyed reading a translation of that. That was, yeah.
So can you think of anything that you took away from it?
I guess it was just the main thing was that it is like it is a big responsibility, and you have to kind of like understand that sort of responsibility and sort of really take that on. It's not just something you can sort of play around with half-heartedly kind of thing. You should really take that seriously, that somebody is bringing themselves and being vulnerable in that sort of position of being a patient. And so, taking that really seriously and, treating them from the heart, and also just like that expanded kind of understanding of, not just like working with with a single person, but it's also kind of like a giving back, a way of giving back to the universal life or whatever it is. And I think having some kind of like practice of giving back is really important. And so cultivating that in your medical practice can be really powerful as well.
Yeah. And then in the Yangxing chapter, he talks a lot about cultivating that presence of stillness at the core, which I think comes from Buddhism. That's the Buddhist influence, that emptiness, that mindfulness, or whatever you call. I mean, there are all these words for it in English.
Yeah.
But really cultivating.
You mentioned a little earlier about having a little bit of imposter syndrome around not being like a medical practitioner, but learning all these. But I feel like Chinese medicine is so much more than just needles and herbs. It's kind of a way of being and a way of like moving through the world and understanding the world around us. So I was really interested to get your perspective of all. To understand some things that might have changed for you in your life and how you kind of like approach things from going through the process of translating and learning these different things, and how's that sort of changed your view of life and the world and and everything.
It's hard, because I'm in it. So I'm trying to put myself outside of my I mean, I think every project I do affects me deeply, because it's not a black and white. It's not like translating classical Chinese is so challenging that a lot of times I can't think of the right I know I'm just not getting it. So I go for a walk on the beach, or I'm up at 2 in the morning, and it's like, boom, there it is. There's the insight. So I sit, when I'm working on a book, I sit with that material kind of 24/7, and or for a course. So when I organized a retreat with Lillian Bridges and Brenda Hood on the transformative power of yin, and I spent the year, I felt like a complete imposter. Who am I to organize this retreat? But I had a dream about sitting on a couch with Brenda on one side and Lillian on the other side, and hearing them, listening to them talk about alchemy. And I'm just like, oh, I guess I have to. So I called them up the next morning, and I'm like, you ladies, we have to do this. And so I spent a year kind of getting ready, thinking about yin. And I had sort of this blog where every day I did a picture or a line or something about the transformative power of yin. And, if you do that for a year, it just changes. Like the power of yin. It's kind of a contradiction, but there is yang power and there is yin power. So there's that. And then when I did the Humming with Elephants, I thought about yin and yang for that year or however long it took. And then, we just did the postpartum care. And now there's like pregnant ladies and ladies with babies all around me. And I think about my own experience when I had my daughter and how it could have been different. So I'm having a lot of conversations. And some of them turned political, because taking care of women in that or parents, really, helping parents raise children in a way that involves pampering. That was Leo Locke's insistent, that it's not just providing for the daily need, but as apparently a new parent, I don't know, Australia must be more civilized than the US, but I was a single mom, and it was brutal. It was, and how did that affect my daughter? Because I was so exhausted that, how would her experience that preciousness of that nest for the first year of their life, of the baby's life, really in the beginning, it's so important that the parents are taken care of so that they can be there for that baby. That's what makes a strong, solid adult. So that's where I can't not care about what I teach or write.
Yeah. And you can't not embody it and not have it change you and transform you as you sort of read into it. And I think I
can't. I think that's why I'm not an academic.
But I think that's really beautiful, and it kind of highlights how there's so much more to Chinese medicine than just the needles and the herbs. I really think that's like the small part, and really the strength of Chinese medicine is sort of helping transform our worldview or how we sort of interact with the world, and I think that's really powerful. I had one last little fun question to wrap things up with you, and I think maybe I know the answer to it. But if you could have dinner with any classical Chinese medical doctor or author, who would it be, and what would you discuss?
Any classical Chinese medicine author?
Yeah.
You mean an ancient person?
It could be, it could be...
I'm just thinking, I'd get on the plane to Taipei right now and get a bowl of steaming jiaozi. At the street corner. But you're talking about ancient Chinese.
Yeah, any kind of historical figure.
Historical? Oh no, that eliminates the divine farmer.
I guess it could be
It could be a mythological.
Mythological, or even the Yellow Emperor, or whatever, yeah.
I think the divine farmer and I would have gotten along really well.
Yeah.
Because he's got the goat horns. And now my goats just go wherever but when I lived in New Mexico, I would take them for walks. And I think they've really affected me. Like, I watch them, how knowledgeable they are, how they nibble on things. They know what they need when they're sick, and the knowledge that animals have about how to treat themselves, that embodied knowledge. I think we can learn a lot.
Yeah.
So to me, the divine farmer with the horns and the
Yeah.
animal
You probably
skin.
have some good like farming and like gardening tips as well for you.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Before I let you go, would you please let everyone know where they can find out more about you and your offerings and maybe your mentorship course and yeah, just where people should go to find out more?
Yeah, so if you happen to watch this in the next couple of days, I'm starting my 2 year program on Thursday, September 11th, or possibly a cohort on Wednesday night. So if you get this in the next week or so, there's a I had one super enthusiastic student from Australia, and she's been waiting for like over a year, and she talked me into doing a cohort that works for an extra cohort that works for Australians. So there's still room in that second cohort that would work for Australians and people from New Zealand or East Asia. So it's at probably at 4 p.m. my time, which I don't know what that would be your time, but
Yeah, sometime in the morning.
yeah, your morning.
Yeah, maybe.
So if you're interested in that, so translatingchinesemedicine.com is my website for translations. If you're interested in my books, it's happygoatproductions.com or China Books.
Yeah, I was gonna say. If anyone-
Absolutely, you got to support your bookstore. These days it's very special to have a physical bookstore. So
Yeah,
I really want to thank you for. I think you're doing a great service for the profession in having that physical space. I think
yeah,
that's
it's
really
definitely a
awesome.
dying breed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the class that I'm starting is if you go to translatingchinesemedicine.com and you go to programs, and then it's the Triple Crown. It's the 2 year the intensive program, and we're starting with foundations this week.
Amazing. Yeah, and if anyone has sort of listened this far and really enjoyed the conversation, I encourage anyone interested to definitely go check that out and seriously consider signing up for that because I think we need more people, more practitioners who can translate and or understand the text from that sort of perspective. So thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thanks for this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for spending the time and I really had a lot of fun. That
Me
was great.
too. Me too. It's nice to connect with you and